The sun had begun its descent behind the distant hills, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the thick forest floor. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and wood, the humid warmth of the late afternoon hanging in the stillness. In this remote sanctuary, the only sounds were the rustle of leaves swaying gently in the breeze and the occasional call of a bird perched high among the towering trees. But the forest, though alive, felt strangely empty. The large animals, the ones that would normally be grazing in the open meadows, had been absent for weeks. Only the smaller creatures, monkeys, birds, and rodents, scurried about, too small to fill the void left by the absence of giants. Amid this eerie silence, there was one figure that stood tall, moving alone at the edge of the trees. A giraffe. She was the last. Her coat, a patchwork of golden browns and creamy whites, glistened faintly in the fading light. She moved with careful grace, her long neck twisting to nibble on the last leaves of the remaining acacia trees. Her steps were slow, deliberate, yet there was a palpable tension in the air, a sense that she was aware of something, the absence, the silence, the creeping sense of danger that had pervaded the land. The sanctuary had once been a thriving paradise for animals. The trees had stretched higher than any skyscraper, and the grasslands were filled with herds of zebra, gazelles, and the majestic elephants that tromped through the undergrowth. Lions and cheetahs prowled the far reaches, and the thick forest that encircled the sanctuary had served as the perfect cover for all. But that was before the fire. Months earlier, a devastating wildfire had swept through the region. What had once been a vibrant paradise was now scarred. The trees, which had once towered high and strong, stood in twisted ruins, blackened trunks with no leaves to shelter the animals that used to roam freely. The ground was still warm in places, and the scent of charred wood lingered in the air, haunting every breath. The giraffe, standing tall at the edge of a scorched forest clearing, was the sole survivor. The desolate remnants of the forest, seeking out any trace of food or shelter that might remain. Her eyes, large and dark, scanned the horizon with a quiet intensity. She was aware of the dangers that lurked in the silence, those that she could not see but could surely feel in her bones. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. As the sun dipped lower, the shadows deepened, stretching further as the night began to reclaim the land. The giraffe's movements slowed, a natural instinct to remain still when the world around her grew colder and darker. Her ears twitched at the distant rustle of something moving in the brush. A shadow flitted across the ground, but it was gone before she could identify it. Her gaze shifted to the other side of the clearing, where a faint glimmer of water shimmered in a small pool, a rare sight in these times of drought. The giraffe's heart quickened. The pool was her destination, a place where, for now, she could satisfy the burning thirst that had followed her for days. She moved cautiously, the weight of every step seeming to echo in the quiet. But something was different tonight. The stillness, the air thick with expectation, felt oppressive. Her long neck extended as she bent to drink from the pool, her tongue gently lapping at the cool water. The sound of the water was soothing, but as she raised her head, she froze. The distant snap of a twig. The giraffe's body tensed, her muscles taut. Her ears flicked backward then forward again. Her breath came in shallow, measured inhales. She knew she was not alone. For a long moment she stood perfectly still, waiting for the next sound. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it a faint scent, something she had not smelled in a long time. The musky odor of predators. Her instinct screamed for her to flee, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. The landscape, once familiar and safe, had become an alien world. The giraffe's mind raced, a primal fear gnawing at her. She needed to move, to run, but the longer she waited, the more the tension grew. Another sound, closer this time, something large and heavy, moving stealthily, breaking the silence. Her heart began to race as she pivoted, her eyes darting across the landscape in search of the threat. And then, from the underbrush to her right, a pair of glowing yellow eyes locked onto hers, the eyes of a lion. The giraffe stood frozen, her muscles screaming to flee. The lion, too, paused, seemingly calculating. Its golden mane was matted with dust, its massive body sleek and powerful. It was hungry, she could tell. Its stare was unyielding, its every movement deliberate. For a moment, they simply watched each other. Two creatures of the wild, each aware of the other's presence, each aware of the tension in the air. The giraffe's body was tense, ready to sprint, but she had no idea where she could run. The fire had taken away the wide-open plains, and the forest that remained was too dense for her to escape easily. The lion's tail flicked once, a warning. With a sudden burst of speed, the giraffe turned and bolted, her legs stretching to their fullest, carrying her through the darkening forest. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted across the uneven ground, the sound of the lion's pursuit close behind her. The forest seemed to narrow, the trees crowding in on her, but then, just as she thought she couldn't run anymore, a low growl reverberated in the distance. Another lion. The chase was no longer a solitary pursuit. It had become a coordinated effort. The giraffe's instincts told her to push harder, to go faster, but the branches and thorns of the overgrown forest slowed her progress. She was tiring. She could feel it in her legs, in the sharp burn in her side. The lion's roar echoed once again, now closer, and the giraffe's breath came in ragged gasps. She could feel the eyes of the predator on her, could hear the heavy paw steps as the lion closed the gap. And then, just as she was about to collapse from exhaustion, something unexpected happened. A loud crack split the air, a thunderous sound that reverberated through the trees. The ground shook beneath her hooves, and the earth seemed to groan. The giraffe stumbled, nearly losing her footing. She looked up. The sky above had darkened almost completely, but there, just in the periphery of her vision, something was moving. A figure. A large, shadowy presence bloomed in the distance, blocking her path. The lion, too, had slowed, its posture shifting from the hunt to something else. The giraffe stood motionless, her heart pounding in her chest, her ears straining to hear what was happening. Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled again, and the enormous shadow revealed itself, a massive figure emerging from the trees. An elephant. The elephant's massive body, scarred from years of surviving the harsh conditions of the sanctuary, loomed like a silent protector. It was a rare sight in these parts. Most of the elephants had left the sanctuary after the fires, migrating to safer lands. But this one had stayed, and in the glow of the moonlight, it appeared as though it had been waiting. The lion hesitated, its eyes now flicking between the giraffe and the elephant. The lion growled, but the elephant remained unmoving, its massive ears flared in warning. The giraffe, still trembling from the chase, stood frozen. It wasn't just the presence of the elephant that had calmed her. It was the realization that, despite the odds, she was not truly alone. The balance of the sanctuary, once shattered by fire and drought, had found its strength again in unexpected ways. The survival of one creature depended not only on its own strength, but on the strength of those around it. The lion, sensing that it was outmatched, retreated into the darkness, its glowing eyes the last thing the giraffe saw before the night enveloped her once again. As the giraffe, exhausted but safe for now, lowered her head to the ground, the elephant stood silently beside her, its towering figure a symbol of resilience and solidarity in the face of adversity. And as the giraffe rested, the forest around her seemed to breathe a little easier, as though nature itself was slowly finding its way back. But deep in the shadows, the tension remained, just below the surface, waiting for the next test. The last giraffe had found an unexpected protector, but in the wild, nothing was ever guaranteed. The story wasn't over yet. The night stretched on in an uneasy calm. The giraffe, her muscles sore from the frantic flight, remained still beside the elephant, her large eyes scanning the shifting shadows of the forest. She could feel the cool breeze against her fur, the lingering scent of earth and smoke in the air. The elephant, a towering guardian in the silence, had yet to move, its massive form standing like a sentinel, its ears twitching at every slight disturbance. The giraffe's gaze shifted toward the distant tree line, where the forest seemed to dissolve into an impenetrable blackness. The scent of the lion was still fresh in the air, mingling with the acrid remnants of smoke. But the lion had retreated, for now. For how long, though? The giraffe could not afford to let her guard down entirely. She shifted, her long legs aching, but she couldn't rest yet, not fully. The elephant, sensing her unease, took a slow step forward, its bulk moving with an eerie grace for its size. With each deliberate movement, it stirred the air, sending a faint, unsettling ripple through the forest. The giraffe hesitated, but then followed the elephant's lead, the weight of their shared journey pulling them forward together. They walked in unison, the giraffe's long neck stretching out with each careful stride. She trusted the elephant, though their paths had never crossed before. In this desolate place, in the aftermath of destruction, alliances were born of necessity. Survival no longer belonged to individuals, it belonged to those who could stand together against the threats that lurked just out of sight. They continued deeper into the forest, moving with purpose but with a subtle tension that made each step feel like an echo in the quiet night. The further they ventured, the darker and thicker the forest became. The once spacious sanctuary was now a maze of jagged trees and dense underbrush. The giraffe's sharp vision struggled to pierce the oppressive darkness. Her thoughts constantly pulled to the shadows at the edge of her sight. Then, as if responding to the oppressive silence, the forest erupted into chaos. A low, guttural growl broke through the night. The giraffe's body stiffened in reflex, every muscle coiled in readiness. The elephant, too, seemed to sense the shift, its large body tensing in preparation for what was coming. But this time, it wasn't the lion. It was something bigger. The growl was followed by the sound of branches snapping under the weight of a massive creature pushing through the dense underbrush. The giraffe's eyes widened, her heart hammering in her chest. The forest seemed to close in around them, the space shrinking as the creature neared. From the thicket, emerging into the clearing with the moonlight catching on its dark form, came the largest predator she had ever seen. A giant crocodile. Its scales were dark and glistening, its powerful legs moving with a terrifying speed that was unnatural for a creature of its size. The giraffe recoiled instinctively, the magnitude of the creature's presence overwhelming. She could see the sharpness of its teeth, its eyes glowing like molten amber. There was no mistaking the danger. It was unlike anything the giraffe had ever encountered before. The elephant, however, did not falter. It shifted its weight, positioning itself between the giraffe and the crocodile, its massive trunk raised high in a display of dominance. The crocodile's eyes narrowed, but it did not retreat. Instead, it surged forward, a terrifying speed in its movements, sending a shock of panic through the giraffe's veins. The giraffe wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The terrain was too dense, the predator too close. She watched as the elephant, in a swift motion, swung its trunk with a force that could shatter boulders, striking the crocodile squarely on its side. The force of the blow sent the crocodile staggering, its heavy body momentarily off balance. The giraffe felt a flicker of hope. The elephant's strength was unmatched. Perhaps they could fight it off. But the crocodile recovered quickly, its mouth opening wide with a terrifying hiss as it lunged forward, aiming for the elephant's legs. The ground shook with the clash of titanic strength, the forest quivering in response. For a moment, the giraffe's world felt suspended in time. She saw the power of the elephant's blows, felt the reverberation of each strike, but she also saw the deadly precision of the crocodile's movements. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene. It was a battle between two mighty forces, each struggling for dominance in the chaos of the night. But then, there was a sound. A cracking, twisting sound, almost like the forest itself was shifting. The giraffe's head whipped around to see something none of them could have anticipated. From behind the trees, emerging with a fluid grace, came another elephant. This one smaller, but no less formidable. It was charging toward them, its tusks gleaming in the moonlight, its eyes focused with singular purpose. The crocodile, sensing the threat of reinforcements, hesitated for a moment, its attention split. The second elephant arrived with terrifying precision, using its massive tusks to push the crocodile away from the first, its body pressing against the predator's side with crushing force. The giraffe's heart raced as she realized the forest was not as silent as she had believed. These elephants had been waiting for the right moment, waiting to strike. In a final, decisive moment, the crocodile recoiled, its eyes filled with a mixture of rage and fear. The two elephants, now working in tandem, forced the creature to retreat into the dense underbrush. The predator was gone, leaving the forest once again shrouded in silence. The giraffe stood still, her heart still racing from the shock. The elephant beside her lowered its trunk to gently touch her side, its presence a calm reassurance in the aftermath of the battle. The second elephant lingered nearby, its eyes scanning the clearing for any lingering threats. The giraffe's breath slowed, her body still tense but no longer desperate. She had witnessed something incredible, something she hadn't thought possible. The elephants had protected her, not just with their strength, but with their unity. In the heart of the forest, where survival was a constant struggle, it was this unity that made the difference. As the giraffe lowered her head again, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The night was far from over, and the forest still held its dangers, but for now, she was not alone. And as the elephants stood by, their massive figures silhouetted against the fading light, the giraffe knew she had found not just protection, but a chance for survival in a world that seemed to be falling apart.